Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm going to come down to the Senate floor right now and build on my Senate colleague from Alaska, Senator Murkowski's remarks that she just made dealing with national security, the challenges we're facing as a country, authoritarian dictatorships on the march, and what the Biden administration is actually going to do to my state, our state, Senator Murkowski, my state, tomorrow. What we've been told by the Biden administration, hey, Alaska senators, here it comes, more crushing of the state of Alaska. And why this should matter, not just to my constituents, which it really does, they're going to be really upset about it, but this should matter to every American who cares about our country's national security and energy security and jobs and the environment. So, Mr. President, we all know the United States is facing very serious global national security challenges. In fact, we are living in one of the most dangerous times since World War II. I think anyone who's watching recognizes that. We had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense testifying from the Armed Services Committee just last week. They said that. Dictators in Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, North Korea are on the march. They're working together to undermine America's national security interests and those of our allies across the globe. That's happening. I think pretty much everybody here recognizes that. At other times of dangerous global challenges and peril, the normal policy approach of Democrat administrations, Republican administrations, doesn't matter, has been to maximize our country's strengths while undermining the strengths of our adversaries. That's how you beat them. And here in Congress, over decades, we've supported such policies. But the Biden administration is not normal. Indeed, this administration deliberately is undertaking policies to punish Americans, undermine our core strengths, while continuing to empower our adversaries. Now, okay, I know some of you who are watching, wow, that's a pretty big charge. Dan, what are you talking about? Well, let's get into that. What am I talking about? I have this chart right up here. The president's making a choice tomorrow. Is he helping out with our dictatorship adversaries, or is he going to help out working men and women in Alaska and our country's national security? Mr. President, let's take the example of Iran. Due to the successful, comprehensive approach to sanctioning Iran's energy sector by the Trump administration, by the end of the administration, 3 years ago, Iranian exports were down to about 200,000 barrels a day, leaving Iran, the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, the country that swears to wipe Israel off the map. By the end of the Trump administration's massive sanctions policy against Iran, they had about $4 billion in foreign reserves. For a country of that size, that's not a lot. $4 billion. So what do we have with the Biden administration? They start their appeasement policy of Iran from day one, and one element of that was to stop enforcing these oil and gas sanctions. I don't know why, appeasement, maybe we're going to get back in the JCPOA, they thought. But they did that. There's no one who doubts that. Jake Sullivan, the President of the United States, they'll all admit it, because here's the results. As a result, the amount of oil that Iran has started to export over the last 3 years has been up every year, and it's about over 3 million barrels a day. 200,000 barrels a day at the end of Trump, 3 million barrels a day now. Foreign reserves that the Iranians have are about $75 billion. $4 billion at the end of Trump, $75 billion right now during the Biden administration. And of course, the terrorist leadership of Iran is using this windfall, as everybody knew they would, to fund their terrorist proxies. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Remember, you don't have those proxy terrorist groups at all if you don't have Iran. Iran funds them, they train them, they resupply them with missiles. So these groups are not only vowing to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, but aggressively targeting the U.S. Navy and American sailors and Marines in the Red Sea. So that's happening. China's buying about 80% of that Iran oil, so they're being helped by this policy that the Biden administration has to lift sanctions on the Iranian oil and gas sector. And of course, China is also dominating rare earth and critical minerals throughout the world. Hardly a day goes by without a story being published in the American media about the danger to America's economic strength, transition to cleaner energy, and national security that is posed by China's domination of critical minerals around the world, mining them, processing them. Okay, so those are two important trends. They're happening. Iran's dominance on exporting oil and gas, the funding they get from that, the Chinese benefit, they get oil at a discounted price, and China continues to dominate critical minerals around the world. So what is the Biden administration doing to reverse these very troubling national security trends? They are undertaking policies that will make them much worse. Tomorrow, the Biden administration has let the media know. They started leaking this at the beginning of the week. By the way, they let the Alaska delegation know much later. They wanted the liberals and the media to know. But here's what they're going to do. They're going to announce that they're shutting down from further development two of the most important areas of energy and critical mineral development in America. The National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, what we call NPRA, in the Ambler Mining District in Alaska. So tomorrow, the Biden administration is going to announce that it's sanctioning Alaska. Okay? They're not going to sanction Iran. They let China produce all the critical minerals they want. Tomorrow, they're going to sanction Alaska. Americans, my constituents. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. They're coming after the people I represent, and the terrorists in Iran, hey, drill, baby, drill. It's nuts. It's an insult. Let me give a little more detail, Mr. President, on what this means. I talked about the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska. This is a part of the North Slope of Alaska, about the size of Indiana. It was set aside by President Warren Harding in 1923 for oil for the country, particularly the U.S. Navy. They actually called it the Navy Petroleum Reserve. And then in the 1970s, Congress called it the National Petroleum Reserve. This isn't ANWR. This isn't a wilderness area. This is an area designated by this body for American oil and gas development, because we need it. This is one of the most prolific oil basins on the planet Earth. Estimates close to 20 billion barrels of conventional oil, 15 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. As I mentioned, one of the most prolific areas in the world for oil production. It's right next to existing infrastructure. And, oh, by the way, Mr. President, it is developed with the highest environmental standards in the world. You think the Iranians have high standards? You think the Chinese do when they mine their critical minerals? You think the Russians do? You think the Saudis do? They don't. The place that has the highest environmental standards in the world on resource development, by far, is my state. Hands down, everybody knows it. So what's the Biden administration do? Drill, baby, drill for the Ayatollahs. Don't give a damn about the environment. Alaska, the highest standards in the world, we're going to shut you down. So tomorrow, the Biden administration is going to announce they're going to take 13 million acres of the National Petroleum Reserve off the table for development. Wow, that's a good idea, Joe. That's a really good idea for the national security and energy security of our country. Let the terrorists here drill. Let Putin drill, and you're going to shut down Alaska. 13 million acres. Let's go to the Ambler Mining District. It is considered one of the most extensive sources of undeveloped zinc, copper, lead, gold, silver, cobalt, anywhere in the world. Senator Murkowski did a good job just a couple minutes ago explaining what we have in the Ambler Mining District, in Alaska, in America. Again, when we mine in Alaska, high standards in the world by far, not even a close call. You think the Chinese have high environmental standards when they mine? Yeah, they don't. So, this part of Alaska, part of America, is critical for the minerals we need for our renewable energy sector, for our economy, of course, to compete against China, and for our national security. F-35s have all kinds of critical minerals that we need and rare earth elements. But tomorrow, the Biden administration is going to announce that they're going to reverse a previously permitted road. By the way, a 7-year EIS cost $10 million. We paid for in Alaska. That was permitted. Tomorrow, the Biden administration is going to announce that they're going to reverse that permitted road and say, Ambler Mining District, America, sorry, off limits. Our adversaries will certainly be celebrating these national security suicide measures of the Biden administration. It's only going to strengthen them. Putin, Xi Jinping, the terrorists in Iran, North Korea, they're going to be like, holy cow, I can't believe this. These Americans have all this stuff in Alaska. And Joe Biden and his radical allies are going to shut it down. Xi Jinping's going to be like, damn, the Americans are going to be more reliant on us for critical minerals. I guarantee you they were worried about the Ambler Mining District, but don't worry, Xi Jinping. Joe Biden's sanctioning my state. Don't worry. He's sanctioning Alaskans. Won't sanction the Iranians. Drill, baby, drill with them, but you're going to sanction Alaskans. So, Mr. President, this is just insanely stupid policy. Everybody knows it, but I want to mention something else. These policies are also lawless. And even my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who don't always get it when it comes to American energy, Alaskan energy, you should get it when we pass laws that say you got to do X, Y, and Z, right? When we pass laws that say things like shall. The Biden administration doesn't get it, especially when it comes to Alaska. We passed in 2017 the requirement to do 2 lease sales for ANWR. My state had been working on that for 40 years. The leases, the first one was done during the Trump administration. Biden administration came in and said, we're going to cancel those leases. No reason. Lawless. Okay? But let me just give you an example. So they're going to take half of the NPRA off the table tomorrow for development, 13 million acres, even though Congress in 1980 directed the Secretary of Interior to conduct an expeditious program of competitive leasing for oil and gas in the NPRA. So we're telling any executive branch official, hey, you got to develop the NPRA. It's for America. It's for the oil and gas that we need. Tomorrow, Joe Biden's going to say, Congress, we don't need to listen to you. So that's lawless action number 1 as it relates to NPRA. But lawless action number 2 that they're going to announce tomorrow, Mr. President, on the Ambler Mining District is a real shocker. I mean, even Joe Biden and his lawless administration have to be blushing on this one. By the way, there were some emails that there was a FOIA request when they said, we're going to cancel those ANWR leases, even though Congress said we had to do it. This is the Biden administration canceling the leases. OMB, in emails back and forth between Interior and OMB and the Biden administration, OMB was like, hey, wait a minute, where do you get the legal authority to do that? This is the Biden administration's OMB. This is in emails. Interior, Deb Haaland, they're like, yeah, whatever, we don't care. We're just going to cancel them. So then they're going to take NPRA off the table, and now with the Ambler Mining District, Mr. President, the law is very, very clear. I'll read it to you. This is on Department of Interior's website right now as we speak. Their website says that NILCA, it's a really important law, Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, which was passed in 1980, mandates a right-of-way to the Ambler Mining District. Senator Stevens put that in here. Congress agreed. There's Secretary Holland's Department of Interior website right now. It says, ANILCA requires that a right-of-way access be permitted across National Park Service lands for this project, the Ambler Mining Project. Okay? That's what the Department of Interior website says right now. And then, Mr. President, here's actually the language from a law. Congress finds that there's a need for access for surface transportation across the western Kobuk River unit of the Gates of the Arctic of the National Wildlife Preserve from the Ambler Mining District to the Alaska Pipeline Haul Road, and the Secretary shall permit such access. Shall. I'd like to put this for the record, Mr. President. So that's the law. The Biden administration tomorrow is going to go, we don't care about the law. We're going to take that off the table and reverse the EIS and the road that you guys have tomorrow for good. Again, who's going to benefit? Who's going to benefit? Well, I think these dictators are going to benefit. The Ayatollahs, Xi Jinping, certainly the Alaska workers aren't going to benefit. And that's a big issue, Mr. President. Presiding officer is my friend, but I'm going to say something that I've said on the floor many times. When it comes to national Democratic policy, when they have a choice between that guy or that woman building a pipeline, the great men and women who built this country, their interests, because everybody wants to develop resources in my state, that's the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, or the interests of the radical far left who's driving these policies to shut down my state, every time the national Democratic leaders go with the radical far left. And they tell that young woman who's building that pipeline, good luck. Sorry for your job that you just lost. So the working men and women of Alaska, of America, because these are big projects, they're going to lose. But I'll tell you else, Mr. President, who's going to get hurt really badly by this, and this is a fact, by these decisions tomorrow. These great people. These great people. This is a picture of some of the Inupiaq Native Alaskan leaders from my state. They live on the North Slope of Alaska. They've been living there for thousands of years. Thousands of years. They are fully, unequivocally against this rule that Secretary Holland and the White House are putting out tomorrow. 100% against it. The tribal leaders, the borough leaders, that's our new borough mayor, the North Slope Borough, Josiah Puckatuck, the Alaska Native Corporation leaders, they're fully against this. Every Alaska Native leader who lives up there, this is where they're going to do this, by the way. This is their homeland. And the Biden administration tomorrow is going to look at them and go, we don't care what you think. We don't care what your interests are. The radical lower 48 eco-colonialists are telling us what to do, so you Alaska Natives, tough luck. Now let me tell you a story, Mr. President, that's really infuriating. We held a press conference a couple months ago in Alaska, led by these great Alaska Native leaders. Okay? They're wonderful, incredible people, living in Alaska for tens of thousands of years. They don't like this rule. So they've come to D.C. They came to D.C. 8 times, 8 different times, traveling over 4,000 miles. The leaders of the North Slope, where the Biden administration is going to issue this rule tomorrow, 8 times they came to D.C., flew here, and asked for a meeting with Secretary Holland to advocate, Madam Secretary, this is really bad for us, bad for our future, bad for our economy, bad for jobs. We do not want this rule. Hear us. 8 times they've come here. You know how many times Secretary Holland met with them? The leaders of the North Slope? The Inupiaq Native leaders of the North Slope? 8 times they came to this city flying 4,000 miles. Guess how many times Deb Haaland, who has an Indian trust relationship with these great Americans, guess how many times she met with them? You know the answer. 0. 0. They came here 8 times. So we held a press conference with that banner. Secretary Haaland, hear our voices. She doesn't want to hear their voices. She doesn't want to hear their voices. She won't hear their voices. You want to talk about cancel culture? This administration talks a big game about, oh, we're going to take care of the indigenous people of America, the people of color. But guess what? There's a giant asterisk when it comes to that policy of the Biden administration. Not if you're Alaska Native. Not if you're Alaska Native. And you want to develop your resources? We're not going to listen to you at all. 8 times they came to this city. 8 times Deb Haaland said, sorry, I'm not listening with you. I'm not listening to you. I'm not going to meet with you. So guess what's going to happen tomorrow? The Biden administration is going to issue a rule that every single one of these leaders is adamantly opposed to. And not one official in this administration gives a damn. Let me give you a couple quotes from these great Alaska Native leaders. This is Charles Lampe. He's the president of Kaktovik Inupiaq Corporation. This has been about the Department of Interior's actions, locking up their lands. These are their lands, not Interior's lands, not Deb Haaland's lands. Here's what he said, quote, we will not succumb to eco-colonialism and become conservation refugees on our own lands that they've lived in for 10,000 years. The Inupiaq people have every right to pursue economic, social, and cultural self-determination. My community unapologetically supports the leasing program in Anwar. That's what he's talking about. Many people try to steer the debate to caribou. The Kaktovik, for them, it's about our people and having an economy to survive. Here's Nagaruk Herichuk. He's the president of the Voice of the Arctic. This great guy right here. He's talking about the NPRA rule that Secretary Haaland won't meet him on. In this press conference, here's what he said. This NPRA rule from Department of Interior is yet another blow to our right to self-determination in our ancestral homelands, which we have stewarded over 10,000 years. That's Nagaruk right there talking. Not a single organization or elected leader on the North Slope of Alaska, which fully encompasses the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, supports this proposed rule. None of them do. Joe Biden, Secretary Haaland, are you listening? None of these great Alaska Native people want this rule, and you don't give a damn. He continues, in fact, everyone has asked the Department of Interior and Secretary Haaland to rescind the rule. These actions will foreclose on future development opportunities and long-term economic security for the North Slope Inupiaq communities, the Native communities. You can tell I'm a little mad, Mr. President, because these great Alaskans are being canceled. Secretary Haaland will not hear their voices, and we're going to see that tomorrow. They're going to issue a rule that locks up a huge chunk of their homeland. Here's the bottom line, Mr. President. The Biden administration sanctions Alaskans, sanctions them, while the terrorists in Iran and the communists in China get strengthened by their policies. No wonder authoritarians are on the march. You're sanctioning us. You're sanctioning them. The goal is to sanction the terrorists, not these great Americans who you won't listen to. And when I say sanctioning Alaska, Mr. President, I'm just not talking about what we're going to see tomorrow, which, by the way, again, every American should be worried. They're going to shut down one of the biggest oil basins in America and one of the biggest critical mineral basins in America. For what? Well, I think we all know for what. Joe Biden's kowtowing to the far left radicals because he thinks that's the way he's going to get reelected. But how bad is it when I talk about sanctioning Alaska? Here's how bad it is. My state, since the Biden administration came into office, has had 60 executive orders and executive actions exclusively focused on Alaska. 60. Tomorrow, it'll be 61 and 62. It hits every part of our state, every resource development project, every access to federal lands, every infrastructure project. We got a lot done during the Trump administration. Historic amount of things done for natives, for non-natives, things that we've been trying to get done for Alaska for decades. During the Trump administration, working with a Republican Congress, we got a ton done. The Biden administration comes in, and on day one, they start their war on Alaska. This is a tough chart to read. These are the specific 60 executive orders and actions targeting Alaska by the Biden administration on day one. By the way, that's the president's first day in office, January 20, 2021. He issued 10 executive orders and executive actions exclusively focused on Alaska. 10. So this administration loves to sanction us, loves to sanction Alaskans. And when that happens, Mr. President, you're hurting the country. We need Alaska's resources, our oil, our gas, our renewables. We're proud of all of it. And we have the highest standards in the world on the environment. So this is really bad for my state. By the way, I was in the Oval Office last year trying to convince the president not to keep crushing Alaska, and I handed him this chart. At the time, it was 46 executive orders. Now it's 60, 62 tomorrow. I handed him that. I was respectful. I'm in the Oval Office. But I said, Mr. President, do you know what you're doing in my state? You have any idea what you guys are doing? At the time, it was 44 executive orders and executive actions, singularly focused, exclusively focused on Alaska. I handed him this. I said, sir, this is wrong. You know it, I know it, it's wrong. If a Republican administration came in and issued 44 executive orders and actions targeting little Delaware, sorry, it is little, and you were still a U.S. Senator, sir, you'd be down on the Senate floor raising hell every day. Because it's wrong. And you know it, and I know it. And it is wrong. But, Mr. President, let me end by saying this. It's not just wrong for Alaska. It's not just wrong for Alaska. It's wrong for America. The president is making a choice, not just whether to stiff the working men and women of our great nation, which he's doing with these orders tomorrow, not just whether he's going to hurt my constituents, which he's going to do tomorrow, particularly the Native people, but whether or not to damage our national security even greater. When you shut down the great state of Alaska's potential and ability to produce natural resources for America, you are hurting the country. It doesn't matter where you live. He's making a choice to favor these terrorists over these workers, to favor these terrorists over these great Native people in my state. And here's the message that they're going to be sending, the Biden administration is going to be sending to the world tomorrow. They're going to be sending this message to the dictators in Iran, in China, in Venezuela, in Russia. President Biden is essentially going to say this: we won't use our resources to strengthen our country. Sorry, Alaska, you're off the table. But we're going to let you dictators develop your resources, Iran, to strengthen your country. I'll end with this, Mr. President. I'll never forget a meeting I had many years ago with the late Senator John McCain. and a very brave Russian dissident named Vladimir Kara-Murza. A lot of my colleagues know who Vladimir Kara-Murza is. As a matter of fact, a bunch of us wrote a letter on his behalf. Putin has poisoned him twice. He survived those, but now he's in jail in Moscow. And I worry about his life. Brave man, a wise man. Senator McCain, Vladimir Kara-Murza and I were having a meeting. At the very end of the meeting, I said, Vladimir, one more question. What can the United States do to further undermine the Putin regime and other authoritarians around the world? What can we do? And he looked at me without even hesitating. He said, Senator, it's easy. The number one thing the United States can do to undermine Putin and other authoritarian regimes is produce more American energy. Produce more American energy. We're not doing that tomorrow. The Biden administration is going to tell the world that we're going to shut down Alaska in terms of critical minerals and any more oil and gas development. Joe Biden is fine with our adversaries producing more energy themselves, dominating the world's critical mineral supply while shutting down our own, as long as the far-left radicals he feels are key to his reelection are satisfied. So they're probably going to be satisfied tomorrow. And so are our adversaries. They're going to be gleeful. But certainly the people I represent, and I would say, Mr. President, the vast majority of Americans who understand these issues are going to be once again dismayed that this administration is selling out strong American national security interests and American strength for far-left radicals who he listens to more than the native people of my state or common sense Americans. I yield the floor.